In the previous video, we learned about the best practices for logging, and in this video, we'll learn about how to log using a popular .NET library named NLog. If you are new and want to find your way back, please subscribe to the channel and enable the notification bell. And don't forget to drop a like only if you learned anything from this video. Without further ado, let's get our hands dirty. So let's start with creating a new project. Choose console application, name it whatever you want, and click next. I use .NET 5 for the target framework, and create. Anything that we do in this video is going to be the same in any .NET app, so it doesn't matter if this is a console app, ASP.NET, or WPF. In the next video, we'll talk about how to integrate NLog with ASP.NET internal logging system, so don't worry about that. Now let's install NLog. Right click on your project name, click Manage NuGet Packages, and in the Browse section, look for NLog. Install the first result. Now close this. You can also double check the installation here. Now the next step is to configure NLog. We can configure NLog with code or by an XML file. If you do it in code, you have to recompile every time that you change the configuration. But with XML, you can even change the configuration at runtime. So I prefer XML file. Now let's create that XML file. Right click on your project, click Add and New Item. Choose Data and XML file. Name it nlog.config. The name is important. You can name it whatever you want, but then you have to explicitly tell NLog what is your config file. So this is easier. When your application starts, NLog looks for a file with this name in the current directory of your app. Currently, this file is not going to be inside your build directory. You have to right click on the file, click Properties, and in the Copy to Output directory, set Copy Always. This way your file will be copied to the build directory every time. Now let's do the configuration. Open Google and search for NLog. Open the first result, hit Getting Started, and open Getting Started for .NET Core console application. Scroll down and copy this XML. Remove this and paste your XML here. There are two main sections in this file, targets and rules. Targets are where you store your logs. You can store your logs in a file, database, console. You can send them over network or send them to an email, and that's the type of your target. Here we have a file and console, so logs will be written to a file or to the console. If you choose the type of log, you have to specify a file name. So each type has its own properties. You can add as many targets as you want. The most important property on targets are layout. Layout defines how we want to write or log. You can fill it with string or a complex object. For this video we use this string, but in the upcoming videos I'll show you how to define a complex object. That will be very useful. But for now, let's just stick to this string. In this string you can write whatever you want, but let's keep it as small as possible and readable. Look at this syntax. This is a layout renderer. These are predefined layout renderers in NLog. So this one just puts out current date. This one generates the level of the log. And this one is obviously the message of the log. You can create your own layout renderers. Maybe I create a video for custom layout renderers if you want me to do that. So you can ask me in the comments. For now, don't worry about all event properties because I'll talk about it later. Finally, exception is going to write any exception in the message. As you can see, you can specify parameters for your layout renderers. Parameters come after the colon with a key value pair. If you remember from the previous video, we also want to log the name of the logger, and logger is what we use to log. So let's add it. Here, add a layout renderer, and its name must be logger. Let's copy this to console. Okay. Now let's talk about rules. Using rules, we can define which logs must be sent to which targets. You can specify as many rules as you want to. The most important property on logger is the name. In the name, we specify a string. This string is just a pattern to match the logger names. A star means to match all the loggers. But let's say we want to just match any logger that comes from the Microsoft namespace. So add Microsoft dot star here. So Microsoft dot entity framework will go here. There are also min level, max level, or levels. You can specify which levels of log to come here. And finally, write to property. Here we specify a comma separated list of targets. As you can see, log console is here and log file is here. Let's say we want to write Microsoft ones only to console. If a log matches this one, it will still go down and match the other ones. But if you want to stop the log here, you can use final equals true. So any log that is generated by Microsoft will not go any further. Finally, you can also set the auto reload to true to reload the configuration whenever you change it, and a path for internal log of the NLog. So in this path, NLog logs its own logs. Now let's do some logging. Open up your program.cs and create your first logger. You can do this using nlog.logmanager.getLogger. When you do this, you have to specify a name. For example, my logger. This is the name of your logger which we used in the NLog config here. So you could specify even Microsoft.something, but usually we use the other overload. Get current class logger. This will use the fully name of the current class as the name of the logger. So here we will have logging.program. Now that we have created our logger, we can use it to log. Let's log something. Logger dot, as you can see, we have the levels of our log. So let's log info. Now you have to specify a message. Let's say app started. Now what if you want to specify any parameters in this string? You may be tempted to use a string interpolation. So you add a $sign and do this. For example, let's log these arguments. This is not a good way to do this. This will both impact your application performance and also you will lose some of the features here. In .NET you can use a string.format to specify a format inside your string. For example, you can say a equals 0 and here specify a value for that 0. In NLog, we have something more powerful, and that's called structured logging. Let's remove this $sign, and now let's rename this to arguments. Now let's pass the args here. This way, not even this string is evaluated here, but also this will be added to a dictionary called event properties. Remember we talked about event properties here? That's what we were talking about. So when we say all event properties here, all the event properties inside our message will be logged with their values. Now let's add another event property. For example, username. Now let's specify some args for this. Right click on your project properties, click debug. In the application arguments, write a equals 1 and b equals 2. Now let's run the application and see the results. As you can see, we have our logs here. Let's also have our config to compare. Here, as you can see, we have date, level of the log, name of the logger here, and message. Look at the formatting of the message because I want to talk about that. You can see how our array is formatted here, and when we send a string, it is added just like in a string. Finally, we had event properties. You can see arguments with its values and username with its value. This will be useful for searching through our logs. Now let's get back to our program CS. Our logs also have been logged in the files, so let's open this, and as you can see, our log is here. Now before talking about the formatting of the values, let's see how do we log errors. So let's say we have a try catch block here and an exception. So we use logger dot error fatal or warning depending on what is the error, which I talked about in the previous video. Let's say we use error here, then we pass the exception and any optional message. For example, this was unexpected with any arguments. So this too is the value of these args. Now finally, don't forget to shut down NLog before exiting the application. So you have to call nlog.logmanager.shutdown. This will flush all the logs to the targets. You have to do this before exiting your application. Now let's head back to NLog's website to talk about the formatting of the values. Now let's go up, find how to use structured logging and click. Scroll down here, and as you can see, each type of .NET is mapped to a formatting in NLog. So if you use a string, it will be passed in double quotations. Numbers will not have quotes. A null will be printed as null. Any enumerable will be printed this way. Dictionaries this way. NLog will call toString on objects. And you can also use an @ before your value to force JSON serialization. So your value will be formatted as JSON. You can also call $sign to force to a string. That's enough for this video. In the upcoming video, we'll talk about how to integrate NLog with ASP.NET Core features. So if you don't want to miss that, subscribe to the channel and enable the notification bell. And if you learned anything from this video, drop a like. Until next time, enjoy writing.